Milwaukee. Michael, you recently called for an investigation into the Stand Your Ground law to see if there are perhaps racial biases built into this law. Explain that.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Drew. It's a pleasure to be on your show. I called for this investigation because there's a lot of questions around Stand Your Ground laws that would need to be answered, but here are some facts. The facts are, since these laws have been enacted, you've seen basically a big jump in justifiable homicides in this country. In states like Texas, Florida, and Georgia, it's been 200-300 time increase since they've been enacted. The second fact, and this is the most disturbing, is that when you look at the data, and these are just data reported to the FBI, a black person is 5 times more likely to be the victim of a justifiable homicide by a white person than if you just look at homicide stats as a whole. That is extremely disturbing. Add to that the fact that these statutes vary in terms of whether or not the prosecutor or the police, and in this case, as we saw, the police made the initial determination, it appears, that George Zimmerman was protected under Stand Your Ground. Absent what the Martin family did, absent social media, this would just be an unreported statistic that would never have seen the light of day. That's why I want the Commission on Civil Rights to investigate it, do some fact-finding, shed light on this very important issue, because the implications on race in this country and whether or not we've created a system of vigilante justice that has a veneer of race under it, on top of it, is something that I think really needs to be explored.
Ken, what do you say to those concerns?
Well, I would say that Michael is wrong on 2 counts. First of all, there is no victim in a justified homicide. A justified homicide is where one human being takes the life of another in a situation where the law says his actions are justified, such as someone tries to kill you, you fight back in self-defense, and the attacker dies. That is a justified homicide. So there is no victim in a justified homicide. Secondly, the Stand Your Ground law in Florida, since obviously that's what's driving this discussion, is not at all at issue here. All it does is remove from a person the duty to retreat when possible. In order for Stand Your Ground to apply, there must be 2 things. First of all, you cannot be the assailant or the attacker. You must be the intended victim. And secondly, retreat must be an option. The issue just becomes that you don't have to retreat. Under either version of the facts here, because obviously there's 2 different sides here as to what the facts are, and you and I don't know what those facts are. Under either story, Stand Your Ground does not apply. If, in fact, Mr. Zimmerman was the instigator of a confrontation, then he is not protected by Stand Your Ground. On the flip side, if the other narrative turns out to be true, that he was on the ground with someone on top of him, obviously if you're on your back on the ground, you can't run away, so there is no duty to retreat. Stand Your Ground does not apply because retreat is impossible, and the situation would instead just be governed by normal self-defense laws, not Stand Your Ground. That does not apply under anyone's version of the facts in this tragedy in Florida.
Ken, I'm not sure that the idea of retreat is as concrete a concept as you need to be able to back up in space, as if your back is against the grass, you can't retreat. You can certainly crawl away, but Michael, I wonder if you have a response to Ken.
Well, first of all, I think Ken is wrong on 2 points. One, Stand Your Ground is implicated in this because the Florida police initially let Zimmerman go because of the Stand Your Ground issue, number 1. Number 2, he also said there was no victim here in a justifiable homicide. That's a tautology. That absolutely begs the question, which I want to investigate, which is whether or not these charging decisions, these ability to raise this defense, in and of itself has a race element to it in the first place. There is a victim here. It's Trayvon Martin. How that gets resolved in the courts will be something that the courts will have to decide. But the fact of the matter is that absent people raising this issue, George Zimmerman would have been free and would still be free under Stand Your Ground. And that's the important point of why we need an investigation. Because when you look at these statistics, when you look at the fact that black men or women are much more likely to be the victims of justifiable homicide than if you just look at normal homicide statistics, there's something that we need to take a look at here. There's something that demands further investigation.
And Ken, I don't think I heard you really address the race issue in your response. Want to have at that again?
Well, my issue would be that people, regardless of race, have the right to defend themselves. Now, my co-author on this piece, Ken Blackwell, is a former undersecretary at HUD and mayor of a big city. And as we talked through this issue, writing the column together that started this conversation, he grew up in the projects, and we talked about the importance of people in public housing, many of whom are minorities, disproportionately so, having the same Second Amendment right to defend themselves and to be governed by reasonable self-defense laws like everyone else. This is to protect everyone regardless of race or gender. All this law is that if you are attacked, if you are a would-be victim, you do not need to turn your back 180 on your attacker, exposing your backside as you attempt to flee, where it's much harder to defend yourself. If you choose to stand and fight, if you believe that that's the safest course for you, this law simply says that you have the right to do so. But I want to make a very important point here. That's the majority rule. That is the law in the majority of states. Stand your ground laws were only passed for a small number of states where that was not the rule. But most states in the United States have always said that if you're attacked, you are not legally required to turn your back and run away from your attacker while he is attacking you.
Daryl, I have less than 1 minute. I want to give you last comment. Let me give Daryl a chance to ring in here. Go ahead, buddy.
Thank you.
Well, let me say this here. In most situations, the law, the facts drive the law. And in this particular case, the facts of this case will drive the law as well. It's important in this case that we know that this was provoked by Mrs. Zimmerman. That's important because the statute, one word that's clear in the statute, if you're the provocateur, no way that you can claim this offense. So all of the evidence in this case, both the 911 calls as well as the eyewitnesses that tied together, clearly point out that Mrs. Zimmerman was the person who provoked this situation.
Well, no
I'd say we don't know the facts, gentlemen. That's what the jury process is for, and that'll be determined in a courtroom, not in a media studio.
Dr. Drew.
No.